What would you do if, after 9 months in a coma, you woke up to find that the only person who never abandoned you was the one you hurt the most? Ethan Wallace, a billionaire from Miami, opened his eyes to a world he no longer recognized. The sterile scent of disinfectant, the rhythmic beeping of machines, and the pale light filtering through the blinds all felt unreal, like a dream that refused to end. But the face beside his bed was painfully real, her face. The woman he had lost by defending someone who never deserved his loyalty. The night of the accident had been one of those humid Florida evenings when the city glistened beneath a curtain of rain. Ethan's car, a silver Aston Martin, had skidded on Ocean Drive, crashing against the guardrail with a deafening roar. When paramedics arrived, they didn't believe he would survive. The wreckage was a mess of twisted metal and shattered glass, a perfect reflection of the life he'd built and destroyed. He was rushed to the most exclusive hospital in Miami Beach, where doctors fought all night to stabilize him. At sunrise, the verdict fell like a hammer: deep coma, no guarantee of recovery. By noon, the corridors were flooded with people in designer suits and expensive perfume. Business partners, investors, friends, all there to show support. The air reeked of false concern and social obligation. His hospital room looked more like a high society gala than a place of healing. Bouquets of white roses, orchids, and lilies crowded every corner, fighting to mask the scent of medicine and antiseptic. Among the visitors, one woman commanded attention: his sister, Isabel Wallace. Dressed impeccably in black, sunglasses hiding eyes that never cried, she moved through the room like a hostess greeting guests at a charity ball. "Thank you for coming," she said to everyone, her voice calm and authoritative. "We're hopeful. Ethan's strong." She made sure everyone knew she was the sister, the only family, the one in control. For 3 days, the hospital buzzed like a corporate boardroom. Ethan's associates gathered, reviewing contracts, signing papers, discussing strategies, as if his body were merely a placeholder, not a man fighting for his life. Secretaries brought folders for signatures that would never come. Lawyers debated power of attorney. Accountants whispered about risk and reputation. The empire Ethan had built through decades of tireless work now trembled, and those closest to him were more worried about saving themselves than saving him. By the 5th day, the parade of visitors began to fade. Excuses came easily: urgent meetings, family matters, business trips. Flowers stopped arriving. Calls dwindled. The once crowded corridor fell silent. Isabel, too, began spacing her visits, claiming she had to keep the company running. Her concern became mechanical, her presence performative. A week later, the room was empty. The flowers had withered. The man who had everything, wealth, status, power, was utterly alone. And miles away, in a modest apartment in Coral Gables, someone still cared. Mara Bennett, a piano teacher, was preparing dinner when the evening news stopped her cold. Local entrepreneur Ethan Wallace remains in critical condition following a car crash late last night. The plate nearly slipped from her trembling hands. For years had passed since their divorce, but hearing his name still hit her like lightning. Her heart skipped, then raced uncontrollably. She turned up the volume, desperate for details: alive or dead. The anchor said coma, no prognosis. Mara sank onto her worn couch, staring blankly at the screen long after the report ended. Memories crashed over her: their first coffee spill at university, the barefoot dances in summer rain, the night he proposed with nothing but a trembling smile and the words, "I don't have a ring, but I have forever." Now, all that was gone. For 2 sleepless nights, Mara wrestled with herself. Part of her wanted to go, to sit by his side, even just once. The other part remembered the humiliation, the betrayal, how he had chosen Isabel over her again and again, until love turned to ashes. But on the 3rd morning, something inside her whispered, "Go." She put on her olive green dress, the nicest she owned, and took 2 buses to the hospital. When the elevator doors opened to the ward where Ethan lay, her legs trembled. Through the half-open door, she saw him, pale, motionless, fragile. The man who once filled rooms with his laughter now looked like a shadow. Mara took one hesitant step forward. Then another. She sat beside his bed, took his hand in hers, and whispered, "I'm here, Ethan. You're not alone." The beeping of the monitors was her only reply, but in that silence, something changed, a promise rekindled, a wound beginning to heal. From that day on, Mara became the one constant in Ethan's forgotten world. Every afternoon after her piano classes ended, she would take the same 2 buses across Miami, walking the final blocks to the hospital in the golden haze of sunset. The nurses soon learned her name. "She's here for Mr. Wallace," they would whisper, smiling softly as she entered. At first, Mara only sat beside him, afraid to disturb the fragile stillness. But after days of silence, words began to pour out. She told him about her students, how little Grace finally mastered for Elise, how one shy boy smiled for the first time when he learned to play Imagine. She described her small apartment, the one with creaky floors and a view of the laundromat below. She told him she'd learned to live simply, no fancy dinners, no luxury, no pretense, and that maybe, for the first time, she had peace. Then, when the night grew still, she would tell him the things she had never said out loud. How the first months after the divorce felt like walking through glass. How she hated herself for still loving him. How she wanted to hate Isabel but couldn't, because anger exhausted her. Sometimes she laughed softly at her own stories. Sometimes she cried. And every night before leaving, she whispered the same words. "Please come back, Ethan. Not for me. For yourself." The nurses adored her. Patricia, the head nurse, once told her, "You're an angel, sweetheart. People come and go, but you stay." Mara smiled sadly. Because someone has to. Days became weeks, and weeks turned to months. Ethan's condition remained the same, stable, unmoving, lost somewhere between two worlds. Still, Mara refused to give up. She brought books and read to him. She played piano pieces on her tablet, the songs they used to dance to. She even borrowed an old guitar one afternoon, trying to play the song Ethan once sang to her on their first date. Her fingers stumbled clumsily over the chords, but she sang with her whole heart. "Even if the world falls apart, I'll still be here, because true love never ends." Her voice broke at the last note. She kissed his forehead and whispered, "Wake up, please. Just, wake up." Outside the hospital, life continued indifferently, tourists on the beach, neon lights in the night, laughter spilling from bars, but inside that quiet room, time had frozen. 9 months passed. 9 long months of one-sided conversations, prayers, and tears that no one saw. Until one December evening. Mara was exhausted, 2 students had cancelled, the rent was due, and she hadn't eaten since morning. She sat beside him, too tired to speak. "Forgive me, Ethan," she murmured, resting her head on the edge of his bed. "I don't have stories tonight. I'm just tired." Her voice trembled. "I'm tired of buses, tired of waiting, tired of hoping for a miracle that never comes. But I won't leave you. I'll never leave you." Her hand lay over his, limp, weary. Her eyes closed. Sleep claimed her, deep and heavy. The room was silent but for the steady heartbeat echoing through the monitors. Then, it happened. A twitch. A faint pressure around her fingers. At first, she thought she was dreaming. But then came another, a deliberate squeeze. Her eyes flew open. Ethan's hand was holding hers. Her breath caught in her throat as she lifted her head. And then she saw it, those brown eyes, open, dazed, searching the room in confusion. After 9 months of darkness, Ethan Wallace was awake. "Ethan," her voice cracked. "You're awake. Oh my God, you're awake." Her scream summoned chaos. Nurses burst in, followed by Patricia, then the doctors. Monitors beeped, questions were shouted, instruments moved, and through it all, Ethan's gaze never left her. He couldn't speak, his throat was too dry, but his eyes said everything: confusion, fear, and recognition. He saw her, not Isabel, not a doctor, not a stranger. He saw Mara. The woman he once loved. The one he'd let go. The only one who stayed. The days following Ethan's awakening were a blur of medical tests, whispered prayers, and cautious hope. His muscles had weakened, his voice trembled, and even lifting a glass of water required effort. But every morning, when his eyes opened, they searched for one thing: her. Mara was always there. Quiet, steady, unwavering. She fed him soup when his hands couldn't. She adjusted his pillows, read him the news, and laughed at his frustrated attempts to form words. She had no obligation to be there, not anymore. And yet, she came. Every day. At first, Ethan thought it was guilt or duty. But soon, he realized it was something far greater: love without condition. One afternoon, a week after waking, Ethan finally asked the question that had burned in his chest since the moment he saw her. "Mara," his voice was weak, but clear enough. "Where is everyone?" She looked up from the newspaper, confused. "Everyone? My sister. My partners. My friends." He swallowed hard. 9 months is a long time. Why haven't they come? The silence that followed was heavier than any answer. Mara's eyes dropped to the floor. She folded the paper carefully before speaking. They came, Ethan. At first. For a few days, the room was full, flowers, gifts, promises. Then the promises faded. They stopped coming one by one. Business trips, meetings, excuses. Ethan's throat tightened. And Isabel? Mara hesitated. She stopped visiting after a week. He shook his head in disbelief. No, that can't be. She loves me. Ask the nurses, Mara whispered gently. They'll show you the records. After the first week, no one came. No one, except me. Her words cut deeper than any wound. Tears welled in Ethan's eyes, tears not from pain, but from truth. The empire he had built was gone, not because of money or time, but because it was built on people who never cared. And the one he had pushed away, humiliated, broken, she had been his only light in the dark. That night, when the hospital fell silent again, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Shame burned in his chest, followed by something unfamiliar, gratitude. He turned his head toward Mara, who had fallen asleep in the chair beside him, her hand still resting on his. And for the first time in a long time, he whispered, "Thank you." Weeks passed. Therapy sessions turned painful progress into hope. Ethan regained strength, slowly learning to walk again. And with each step, his guilt walked beside him. When he was finally strong enough, he asked to speak to Mara alone. She entered the room and froze at his expression, a mixture of resolve and sorrow. "Mara," he began, his voice steady but heavy. "I've spent months thinking about what I did. How I defended Isabel. How I let her destroy what we had. I was blind, and you paid the price." She tried to interrupt, but he lifted a trembling hand. "I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to know, losing you was the greatest mistake of my life." His voice cracked. "You were my family. My peace. My home." Mara's eyes filled with tears. She sat beside him, holding his hand tightly. "Ethan, I didn't come for an apology," she said softly. "I came because no one deserves to be alone. I forgave you long before you woke up. I just never told you." He looked at her in awe. "After everything I did?" "Yes," she smiled through tears. "Because love, real love, doesn't vanish. It changes, it aches, but it stays." Ethan's heart broke and healed in the same breath. "I don't want to lose you again," he whispered. "Not as my wife, not as my past, as my future. Let's start over. No fortune, no lies, no Isabel. Just us, like before." Mara studied his eyes for a long moment, searching for truth. And when she found it, raw, humble, sincere, she nodded. "Then we start slow," she said, smiling. "Like the first time. Just two souls learning to love again." He smiled, a real, unguarded smile, for the first time in years. 2 years later, Ethan sold his company and moved with Mara into a small coastal home near Key Largo. She opened a tiny piano studio where children came to learn music and laughter filled every corner. Ethan began mentoring small local businesses, helping others avoid the mistakes that had once cost him everything. They remarried quietly, surrounded by 10 people who truly loved them. 3 years after that, their daughter, Valerie, was born, followed by a son, Noah. Every anniversary, no matter the weather, Ethan and Mara would dance barefoot in the rain, just like they did that night on the beach long ago. Ethan never spoke to Isabel again. When she tried to reconnect after hearing about his recovery, he simply said, "You taught me who not to trust. Mara taught me who to love." And as the years passed, their life became a testament to one simple truth. The richest man in the world isn't the one who owns the most, it's the one who's loved the best. If this story touched your heart, remember its lesson. True love doesn't vanish when the lights go out. It stays. It forgives. It endures.